All right. How's everybody doing? You. All right. Figure if I was a little boisterous, I could help you guys. Did everybody get lunch? You guys aren't skipping lunch, are you? Seriously? I'm not that good. All right, so I don't need to tell you what we're talking about. It's right there. But we're going to talk about 5 things that designers need to know about designing for the web. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. There's more than 5 things you need to know, okay? You need to know a couple more things than this. But what I really wanted to do out of this session is I want to make it so that if you guys are designing, if you're into this, I want to catch you up or get you up to the latest things out there, some of these latest features that people are using, and understand just the concepts. And you might already know some of this. That's fine. I just want you to get a few things out of this at least. But we're going to go through and talk about where web is today as far as like responsive design, a little bit about what it is, how it works, that kind of thing, not too crazy. And then we're going to go through, and I'm going to show you guys a series of websites, because you guys should see my bookmark list. It's insane. I don't know how many of you guys have like 1 billion bookmarks. Does anybody actually organize their bookmarks? Does anybody have a way to do that? I don't, because I suck at it. But so I have 1 million sites to go to. I'm constantly learning, which we all should probably be doing. If you don't want to learn, you shouldn't be in the web. That's the way I look at it. So we're going to go through and show some sites. We're going to go into Illustrator, Photoshop, show you some concepts about designing. We're going to talk about a lot of different things. And I want to kind of start by talking or asking you guys a couple questions. Like, how many of you are, that's a dumb question. How many of you are designers? All right. How many of you are developers? Like, you consider yourself on the other side of the fence? Why are you here? No, I'm kidding. I'm totally kidding. I'm more of a developer. Yeah. Oh, okay. She's like, all right. How many of you guys have designed a responsive design for a site before? Okay. How many of you have done a non-responsive design? Was there a big difference in your workflow, in how much you charged your client, in all these different things? Responsive design honestly threw my workflow into a crazy tailspin. It was nuts. I couldn't figure out how to get it all done. I mean, I work with a designer, and I've got a developer that I work with. I'm a developer, and we get all this stuff done and together, but we couldn't figure it out. I couldn't figure out how to show my client the different iterations of responsive design, like the responsive nature of the site. How do you get that across to your client? So we go into Photoshop and we create 4 different files, you know? I went to a client like about 6 months ago, and I was like, okay, we're going to design this thing out, get a responsive site going. And I said, how many Photoshop files do you guys work with right now? And they said 14 per page. And that's exactly what I said. I was like, are you kidding me? What are you guys doing? What are you designing for? The toilet, the airplane, what else could you possibly hit, right? So there's a lot of things to learn, a lot of things to keep learning, because things keep happening, keep coming at you. But it's easy to get a little more information if we get started kind of in the shallow end, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to cover things like best methods for designing for different devices, okay? We're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk about designing to a grid, why you do that, and not just to make things look pretty and neat, right? We're going to talk about hosted fonts, which a lot of us already know, but I'm going to show you guys like Typekit and how to actually use them on your site and how you can design with them directly, and also show you how you can design with like Google Fonts and all these different things locally on your hard drive. We'll talk about a little bit about SVG, okay? How many of you guys work with SVG? All right, SVG rules. We're also going to talk about icon fonts, a little bit about those, what they are, good, bad, ugly, etc. And we're going to get to exporting and saving some content, just show you guys some of my favorite practices for getting it done, okay? But I want to start out by talking about the state of the web, like where we're at with responsive design. And this is me sitting at my desk, figuring all this stuff out on my own and talking to clients and friends. But there's actually a pretty cool website that I want to take you to right now. It's called evolutionoftheweb.com. Let me get out of here. It's my PDF. By the way, that's the last bit of slides we're going to do today, so that's good. So this website, evolutionoftheweb.com, pretty cool because it talks exactly about what it says. It talks about the evolution of the web and how it's come about. And it's kind of cool. It was actually built in association with Google and a couple other companies, but if you look at this thing, it's HTML5, CSS, and JavaScript. There's no Flash in there, okay? So you can see there's a lot of stuff going on here. But the thing I love about this is that if I go way back to the beginning days here of the web, back in 1993, can you guys believe the web really just started in 1993? It's kind of crazy. But we have the Mosaic browser, and we have Netscape, my most hated browser ever. And then we keep going. We get up to Internet Explorer. And we talk about, OK, we got Java, Flash, blah, blah, blah. You guys check this out. Look at SVG. Sneaky little SVG. Coming in at 2002, SVG came in on the web. Isn't that crazy? A lot of us just started getting used to it because browsers are finally supporting it. But as we creep along here, you're going to see like an explosion at around 2007, 2008. Look at this, you guys. I get sick looking at this. At around 2007, 2008, mobile devices came into being. A lot more happened simply because we had so many more technologies and things that we're working with. And this is what made designing for the web start to kind of, well, become a little bit more of a headache because we have a lot more to think about. You know what I mean? Now, if you're looking at responsive design, how many of you guys know what responsive design is? OK. A lot of us have a good handle on it, right? The one article I think that this one actually got it started, written by Ethan Marcotte. And if you look at the data on this thing, this just still blows me away. It's only 2010. It's not that long ago that we got to, the devices started coming and we had to figure it out. What is responsive design? Let me ask you that. Anyone care to stand up next to me and tell everyone? No? OK, has anybody ever seen anyone do this? OK, that's responsive design, right? It is, OK? It's the idea of taking our content and making it look good, a good user experience, a good user interface on different devices, right? That's kind of the meat and potatoes of it. I love this site. How many of you guys ever go to your browser and you check to see how cool a site is by dragging the edge? How many of you guys ever do this? You're like, does it work? Is it really? OK. Check out the picture here. I love this because they just kind of added a little touch. You guys see that? It's kind of cool. It's clever, right? So like here, check mobile, right? We're going on to a column, right? There we go, all right? It's kind of cool. It's really interesting. It's one of those things. But the idea here is that we are trying to make it so that it's a better user experience. And it's not just, mobile's not just a stripped-down afterthought, right? That's kind of something we also have to think about. Now, another site I would suggest you guys check out if you're kind of newer to this stuff as far as web design, Google actually has a pretty decent set of, I don't know what you call this, help manuals, whatever. But it's called multi-device layouts. And they talk about responsive web design basics. It's a decent site. You can go take a look at it. Just look for Google and fundamentals. That's what I would look for. You can find this really easily. It takes you through a bunch of different concepts, if you will. Now, what I think is really interesting is that responsive design is not the only game in town, which is pretty crazy. Responsive design's got a bunch of things going for it as far as how it takes your stuff and makes it react to the device, right? This is a website. It is the ugliest site in the world. You will see it's called liquidappsive.com. And the reason why I go to this site is because it's kind of a proof of concept. It shows you this. Here, check this out. If I go in the upper right corner up here and take a look, you're going to see that it's going to talk about adaptive, liquid, responsive, and static, the different ways we can approach building and designing a site, OK? Back in the day, we used to build static sites. Now, static can mean a bunch of things on the web. But what I mean by static is static width. So we're saying we would go in and design something that was pixel perfect, 1024, 768, 800 by 600, something like that. I'm just showing my age. And then we'd take that and we'd slice and dice, save out, table, bam, go, right? How many guys know a little HTML or a lot of HTML? How many guys have ever built a table in HTML? That sucks. Tables are rough. We use them for what we need them for now, but if you could take a table back in the day and you could make it center in your browser, you were like king of the web. That was it. That was the catch and the key, the awesome thing you could do. So, but then, devices started coming out. We actually had, we had the Apple iPhone come out. And how many of you guys have ever been on your device and you look at a site and it's just a shrunk down version of the real thing? You guys ever been like, what the frick is going on there? Like, why are they doing that to me, right? Because it's all about you. Why would they do that, you guys? The device is actually lying to your server. The device is telling your server, hey, I'm not this big, I'm this big. Apple did that on purpose. These companies did it on purpose because have anybody ever been on like an old BlackBerry where you were like tapping the arrows and moving around? And it was like a website, and you had to like move from here to here, and you tap for an hour going to the right, an hour down, right? I should not be, I'm only 40, I'm not that old, but, so essentially what happens was designers looked at it and said, you know what, I don't want this like huge site this big because people are just gonna pinch zoom forever in a day to look at my stuff. So they came up with a liquid layout, it's called. Liquid layout, if we take a look at it, is relatively simple. The big difference here is that everything is like stretchy squishy, okay? So you can see, it's all based on percentages or something like that, a relative unit, we call it. But the point is, if you get down to a certain size here, you're like, whoa, messed up. What do? How do we fix that, right? Okay, so then some people that are smarter than I am came up with responsive design and said, what if we did this? What if we said, let's make it so it kind of grows and stretches a bit in the different devices, but if we get to a certain size or a certain design size and something breaks, we can put something called a breakpoint in there. A breakpoint is also called a media query, okay? So that's CSS, that's styling, you guys. So what we can do is we can say, okay, let's make it responsive up to a point, and then when we get to a point where we don't need 2 columns, we need 1, let's make a big old shift, and we'll put in this media query thing and have it drop down, okay? This is responsive design. There's 2 major features to it. There's a liquid layout, and there are breakpoints. There are media queries. Those are the same thing, you guys, breakpoints and media queries, okay? Now, there is another game in town here, which I actually I use, okay? It's called adaptive design. So adaptive design it's kind of sneaky. It's basically, it's responsive design without the stretch. So if you watch, you guys have seen sites like this, where suddenly it just like click, bam, 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 it starts to do this, right? Okay? A lot of sites these days I've seen, instead of going full responsive, they're going kind of a mix. It's like adaptive responsive, okay? They have a little bit of wiggle, and then at some points it will actually stretch and squish, but then at a big design change where it's 2 column to 1, that'll happen using a CSS media query. So we've got a lot of ways to get it done, okay? It's not, like I said, responsive design is not the only game in town. It relies on certain features. Now, if you are curious about how people get it done, believe me, every time we design a new site and we're faced with a new challenge, new content, new this, new that, I look at it and go, okay, well, somebody else has done this, so I'm going to kind of see what they did and cheat. Mediaquery.es, and I tell this to everybody, which is embarrassing, but I actually thought this was a Spanish site, and I was like, it's Media Query, it's a Spanish site. So if you actually read it, it's Media Queries, and yeah, exactly. And if you go take a look here, there's a lot of sites that, you know what, you're not looking at this necessarily for design, you're looking at for how they handle the content, the user experience, and how things are shown, okay, how things work. So it's a good site to go to. All right, now, when we start talking about design, we're going to jump in here. We're going to start jumping in and actually going into Photoshop and Illustrator and designing this thing, okay? When we start talking about design, there's a couple methods we can work with, right? We can actually work with like desktop first design, which is old school, and we can work with mobile first design, right? How many guys have ever worked with mobile first design? What does that mean? This is going to be the stupidest question of the day. What do you think of me when I say mobile first design? What do you think that means? Okay, it means focus on desktop, right? I'm kidding. Focus on the mobile device. Focus on mobile size, that type of thing, okay? Now there is, Luke Robleski was kind of the creator of all this, which is actually pretty cool. But there's a lot of sites out there you can go to, and one of them, if you ever go to Zurb, Z-U-R-B, good site, a lot of good stuff. They have a whole mobile first section you can learn on how it works essentially. The idea is this. A lot of people are looking at sites on devices like this, right? So if you go to, a client comes to you and says, build me a site, and suddenly you say, okay, cool, I'm going to go to Photoshop, hack out my 1024, and start jamming, mobile's going to be an afterthought. If I were to go and look at this person's existing site and then go look at the analytics on that site, almost everybody's got Google Analytics or some kind of analytics on the back end to see what people are using to look at that site. I just did a redesign on a nonprofit in San Francisco. They're pretty big, and they got a lot of people and stuff like that. They were telling me up and down, they're like, mobile, 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 everything mobile. I went and looked at their analytics. 90% of people were looking at it on 1024 and higher as far as size. So I had a little talk with them, okay? And I said, well, yes, mobile, but let's focus also on desktop as well, okay? So for some clients, some projects, I do use mobile first. I'm focusing on the mobile and working my way out. When we talk about mobile first, we're saying design the user experience for the mobile using our content, but we're going to basically use what's called progressive enhancement. As we get to larger and larger sizes, we're going to kind of start throwing in some of that cool stuff and make it more enhanced, progressively enhanced, if you will, okay? So mobile first is a big concept and something that we are going to try and talk about and work with. All right, now, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go out and go to Photoshop for a second here and talk a little bit about Photoshop and just designing in general. How many guys use Photoshop for web design? Okay. Does anybody use Illustrator, web design? Nice, me too, okay. Does anybody use Fireworks? Okay. One person, 2 people, awesome. Okay, I love Fireworks, I gotta be honest. I seriously love it, and I've used it for years, and enough said. Anyway, so let's talk about Photoshop. Now, when we go into a program and we're gonna start designing, there's a lot of ways to design these days, you guys, and I'm not telling you to start with a static method this way. How many guys have ever heard of things like style tiles, okay, or in-browser design, or there's a lot of ways to approach design these days. You could do code first or jump in. You could do like wireframing and sketching, which a lot of us are going to do, some kind of prototyping. I'm just trying to show you kind of towards the back end here of what we're doing as far as design, okay? So if I come into Photoshop here, Fireworks, Illustrator, whatever tool you guys are using, and I go take a look, honestly, this is kind of one of the big things that I run across all the time. I go in and I'm ready to start a new project. What size are you guys typing in? That's an actual question. What's on the screen? Okay. Yes, you're probably right. Okay. 1440? 1232, 1400? Do you guys see a pattern here? Okay. There's not one set number that everybody in the world is using, all right? But there is a guideline, a general guide. If we take a look forever and a day, it used to be everybody just said web 1024 768. If you fit inside of that, you're awesome, okay? How many of you have ever heard of the 960 grid system? Okay. We used something like that for a long time because it was a great starting point, and 960 got you just inside the 1024 with a little wiggle room, et cetera. These days, if we start taking a look at sizes, who knows what the most common resolution on a desktop or a laptop screen today is? Seriously? I walked into that. All right, so it's 1366 by 768, which means we are going to go big or go home, okay? So we're going to go a little bigger than the 1024 usually. Now, this is if we're thinking in terms of desktop, that type of thing. Obviously, tablet, phablet. Who hates that word, phablet? I freaking hate that word. So phablet, I get it, I understand it, but I don't like it. And then we have, you know, the mobile device, the phone, that type of thing, okay? Now, one site I would go check out, you guys you've got to look at. I don't have this open, and I'm completely forgetting what it is. Are you kidding me? Browser statistics. This is the worst thing in the world to do. Don't ever search for something, and you'll come up with something wrong. Okay, so if you guys go to Stat Counter, you should be looking at sites like this, like Stat Counter, and there's like 5, 6 others. Stat Counter is awesome because it shows you global statistics and local statistics, meaning like the US, you know what I mean? So you can see what browsers people are using the most, what versions of browsers, what sizes of screens, et cetera. You guys check out Chrome in the green right there. Just trumpeting its charge. It's taken over here, okay? And you guys can see Internet Explorer down here in blue. It's still up there, but it's going. I track this because I can't wait to see IE8 die and IE9 die, and I keep tracking it every day, but that's part of it. So I would look at this kind of site just for feedback to figure out what am I shooting at? What size am I shooting for? So if I go into Photoshop and I say, all right, let's go most common, that's awesome, and I start working, how many of you guys are familiar with Retina on the web? When I say Retina design or thinking Retina, what am I talking about? What does that mean? High pixel density, more pixels, that thing, right? Okay. These days, with a lot of Retina devices, and there are more than just like 3 Retina devices out there, there's a lot. We actually call it high DPI, all right? If you guys want to be cool at the office, you can say high DPI, because Retina is an Apple marketing term, all right? And it really referred to the Apple devices that got started. It still works. Everybody calls it Retina, that's totally cool. But when we talk Retina and we start to design, there's some things that we kind of need to keep in mind, okay, as far as working with Retina. Now, you guys, if you are new to web design, or if you're just starting to think about this Retina thing and what it is and how it works, there's a great article on Smashing Magazine called Towards a Retina Web. I would check it out. It's a really good read just to give you some background on what all this stuff means, okay? What this means is more work for us, essentially, because if we have a Retina device, the screen looks better, it looks awesome, because there's usually more pixels packed in an area. The pixels are usually smaller, okay? I found this one site, I kept trying to figure out how do I explain this to people, you know what I mean? Check this out. This actually, I think, does a pretty good job. You guys can see that on the left is standard display, and on the right is Retina display. The pixels are smaller, there's more packed in an area, okay? If you look at the imagery down here, take a look at these images, you can see that on a standard display screen, it's 72 or 96 PPI, and on the right, it just takes the pixels, it jams more in, so it looks smoother, it looks better. Crisper, cleaner, that's what everybody says, okay? What's interesting about Retina is that if we want to use an image, let's say we want to use an image this size, which is like, I don't know, 200 pixels wide or something like that, if we want to make sure it looks good on a regular old screen and a Retina screen, we're going to create at least 2 versions of that image. We're going to create one at the size we're going to use it at, and we're going to create another one at twice the pixel width and twice the pixel height. Because Retina just takes those pixels and jams more in, okay? That's pretty much what it does. That was the most non-technical description you will get of Retina ever, okay? I didn't understand it at first, honestly, but. So if I go into Photoshop and I have an image, just to show you guys really quick, if I have an image, let me zoom in a little bit, and this image is 400 pixels wide, if I'm going to use that at 200 pixels, I'm going to make one at 200 pixels wide and one at 400 pixels wide. 400 is for Retina, 200 is for standard screen, okay? Now, what does that mean for our design process? If you guys are just creating images in Photoshop, that's dead simple. You just go create 2 sizes of images, and you guys have your Retina and your standard if you care about that stuff, okay? But what if I decide that I want to start from scratch and start a design? How do I handle Retina in design? How many of you guys do that when you design like this? How do you handle it? No? Okay. What's that? Yeah. So there's 2 major ways to do this, you guys, as far as design. If you care about Retina, when we go in and we talk about web, for instance, we can either design at size, standard screen, 13, whatever this happens to be, 1300 blah, and then later on, double the pixel width, increase the size of these objects, of these images, and save them out, right? I know some people, myself included, that will also design at Retina size, which means if I care about, I want 1366, will Photoshop do math for me? No. Freaking hate math. 13, 26, whatever, 2800, I don't care. Who cares? Close enough, right? It's web. That's what I always tell the designer anyway. I'm always like, whatever, that's close enough. Okay, so what I can do is I can design at Retina size, which is double, essentially, and then later on, we've already got all the pixel data, and we could just go in and say, let's make it 50% for the regular old images. Does that make sense? There's 2 ways to do it. You hear beefs either way. Increasing image size, if we start at the regular size, increasing size can make them look fuzzy and bad and blah. If you start from huge and then decrease, you're dealing with a much bigger file to start with, okay? So there's good and bad for all these methods. And we're all trying to come up with like the best way to do things, all right? All right, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go in and pick a resolution. I'm just going to stick non-Retina and say 1366. And you guys, by the way, a lot of us are really hooked on resolution, especially if you started in print, right? 300 DPI, remember that, right? So that was the magic number you were printing with, et cetera. On the web, I really don't look at resolution anymore. I look at numbers of pixels, okay? That's kind of what I focus on. How wide in pixels, how tall in pixels is that thing? And based on the screen, how's it going to fit in there, okay? All right, so if I create a new design here, I'm going to go in and take a look at it. We're going to do something very similar for Illustrator. I'll show you guys that in a second here. But if I go in, first thing I'm going to do, let's talk a little bit about grid design, okay? What that means. A grid design means we're going to go and throw out a bunch of columns out here. We're going to throw some guides out. How many guys go out and draw guides for Photoshop or Illustrator, right? Okay, that sucks. Yeah, it's hard. In Photoshop, in the latest version of CC, under the View menu, we do have a new feature called New Guide Layout. Did I just say Nude Guide Layout? New Guide Layout. And what that gives to us, if I click on that, it just throws guides out there for you, okay? It's a pretty simple way to do that, to set up a grid system for yourself, okay? Now, let me ask you a question. Why, as a designer, would you design to a grid? Breakpoints, right? Thinking about dimensions and sizes, right? Another reason, you guys, a big reason, a lot of us are actually starting from HTML and CSS that's already created. And we call those frameworks or templates or fluid grids, those kinds of things, right? How many guys have ever heard of Twitter Bootstrap? Right? So that's a framework. And here's the thing. This is what always cooks my noodle. Let me show you this. Did I just say that? When I work with my designers, I do a lot of WordPress, things like that, and we go in and we've picked my starting points. I've got it all set in stone, okay? But if you're going to work with somebody or you're going to do it yourself, you're not going to reinvent the wheel as far as the code stuff, the HTML, CSS, okay? It's already been done. So why don't you just start from something that somebody can give you. This is an example. I'm not telling you to use this. It's just really simple, and I wanted to show you guys this. But I go to a lot of these, like Twitter Bootstrap and Zerb and all these kinds, and the first time I went to one of these, I was like, they're showing us what 12 columns looks like. I didn't know what 12 columns look like. Thank you for showing me what that is. It's actually, what does that mean, you guys? What does this mean? It means it's built into the code. So this code has styling for 12 columns set in it. So if I use this as a starting point, what do you guys think I'm going to design to? 14 columns? 13? No. We're going to go to 12. So you're going to match usually the Twitter Bootstrap, the whatever foundation you're starting from as far as code, okay? That's why we design to a grid, or one reason why we design to a grid. So in here, I would say 12 columns. I'd set up a gutter and be good to go, okay? How many of you do this in Illustrator? You set up a grid in Illustrator. Anybody do that? Does anyone have a fast way to do that? I'll show you a fast way, okay? All right, so if you guys work in Illustrator, Illustrator is like my favorite. I use it all the time, 1280, whatever. If you're starting with a web design and you want to go whole hog, you got the whole thing out there, you want to set up columns out there, all you got to do is draw a box. So I'm going to go out and draw a box real quick and make it about the size of the page. Make it exactly the size of the page, I should say. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw this horrendous pink in it because I don't like pink, but that's fine. You'll see why in a second. I'm going to go under Object, go to Path, and say, let's split it into a grid. This is going to give us our columns. Okay? So as soon as I choose Split into Grid, it's going to say, what do you want? I want 12 columns. I want some kind of gutter that's going to give me a width of a save here. We can add guides. I can preview it. And I've got myself a grid system. Okay? So these are actually guides. So if I click OK, I can now go out and click on one of these pink boxes and say, select same fill color, and just nuke them, and I've got myself my grid. It's a workaround, all right? But we all have to do this kind of stuff. So this is one way we can do it to get a grid system in Illustrator. Now, we're designing to a grid, which is good. You know, we've got a lot of things going on. Some of the other things that we are going to focus on as far as working with, let's say in Photoshop and Illustrator, we're going to talk a lot about just working smarter, okay? If I work on a project, and let's suppose I want to put imagery in there, I'm going to use smart objects. How many guys use smart objects for Photoshop? Why do you use a smart object? What does it get you? Scalable, right? This whole thing again, okay? Smart filters, yep, totally. Smart filters. It also gets you guys this. I'm going to go in and place an image, okay? And you guys can see that I'm designing right now at about 1200 wide, which is just regular old resolution, okay? I'm going to go to File and go to Place Linked and Place Embedded. You guys can see that we have the Place Linked and Place Embedded. These will automatically create a smart object for us. If you guys paste in, it's going to be a smart object by default. If you look right here, we also have a package command, which grabs it all, just like InDesign. I'm going to go Place Linked, And what's going to happen here is it's going to say, all right, let's go grab something. I'm going to grab a picture, and look at this. This picture is ginormous, you guys, for what I need it for. Okay? I'm designing it about 1250 wide. This thing is about 2800 wide. The reason why I'm doing it is because all that pixel data is going to get stuck in here, linked to, I should say. And when we go to make our images later on, it's always going to pull from that pixel data. So even if it goes to make an image that's twice as wide as the 1200, it's never going to have to make up pixels. It's already there. Okay? So this is what we're doing a lot of times as far as working with this content. I'm going to click place. It's going to put it out there at correct size. And I'll just hit OK and do this. Okay? So we're using a lot of smart objects. That also means that we can edit them pretty simply. Also, you guys, as far as smart objects are concerned, if you're working with a project, I do this all the time. I actually work in Photoshop more like InDesign every day. It's kind of weird, but I'm not a designer, like I said. I work with designers, and we actually will go in and we'll create a folder full of stuff, and we'll link it all to our Photoshop project using smart objects, because it makes it so easy to do updating, right? As a matter of fact, if I have this design here, and let's suppose I want to create a Photoshop file or a couple, I'll piece it out. I'll say, here's the footer, there's a header, etc. I'll make these as separate Photoshop files and just place linked in. That way I can update them across every Photoshop file they go into pretty simply, okay? I know a lot of you know this, all right, but I just kind of wanted to show that. So I would place linked, place the footer in there, and I've got it. There we go, okay? All right, now, as far as also working within Photoshop, for instance, a couple things we want to do. This is gonna be like duh, okay? It's gonna be a real duh moment here, but I get this all the time, you guys. If you're going to work with text in anything for web design, one of the #1 rules we say, as far as text, use round numbers, okay? If you're going to do sizings, if you're going to do leading, kerning, tracking, you're going to do things like that, just make sure that you guys pick like a whole number. I can't tell you how many times I got designers' files and it looks like this, okay? I'm like, seriously? It's like, I understand. A lot of that has to do with scaling, perhaps, things like that. I get it, you guys. I totally get it. But we try and keep things round, okay? Round numbers. Now, as far as working with fonts, let's talk about that a little bit. We're going to work with hosted fonts these days. Do you guys know what a hosted font is? Like what that means? Okay. Think of it this way. Back in the day, we had 13 fonts we could work with. That's nuts. How many of you guys lived during that time? Okay. Sometimes I feel so old. If you look at the text right here, let's suppose that I wanted to use Giddy Up, my favorite font in the world. I wanted to use that, and I know, not a designer, I get it. But I wanted to use Giddy Up, and it was back in the day. We'd have to take all that text and turn it into an image. Okay, there goes your SEO, right? Except for alternate text. Nowadays, we can actually use fonts that are already hosted on the web by somebody else or ourselves. Inside of Photoshop, Illustrator, and InDesign, you guys, we actually have Typekit, which is cool. So if I come up here and I go to choose and I take a look in Creative Cloud, look up here, you're going to see add fonts from Typekit. Now the great thing about this, the thing I love, is I bought Typekit, I used Typekit from years ago, okay? If I go click on this and go look at a font, when I go to Typekit, it's actually going to say you can design locally with this font in any program. You can also use it on your websites. So that's what we're looking for here. If you look right here on the right, you're going to see it says sync, which means let me use it on my desktop now so I can design with it. And we have web, which means give me a bit of code, give me a thing, a widget, a number, and let me stick it in my page, and I can use the font on that web page. So we've got that accessibility right there to be able to use. So if I go pick a font, I'm going to pick something awesome. Load more. Pick something like Monarcha. That's a good one. I don't even know what that looks like. What does it look like? All right. So there we go. So we can pick it. Cloud's going to sync. It's going to grab the font, pull it down. You guys can use it in anything, even Word and wherever else you want. The font's there. If I go back over to Photoshop and start using it now, I can actually do a little search. Monarcha. And there we go. Okay. So we've got our font. Now, this is a hosted font. This is something we want to do. Okay? You really want to do this. If you guys are looking for, how many of you guys use Google Fonts on sites? All right. What I would suggest you do is this. There's actually some of the Google font libraries is built into Typekit, so you can find some of them there. But we don't just have those available. Okay, they're not all available there, rather. So what I use instead is I actually use, along with Typekit, I should say, I use something called SkyFonts. SkyFonts is a little app you guys can download. It's pretty simple. It's free. And what it does is it accesses the entire Google library. So if there's something in Typekit you can't find, you can use this. It downloads the font to your hard drive. You can use it in your applications then and design with it. So if you download SkyFonts, you can see it's going to let me go out. And let me see if I can do this here. There we go. It's going to let me link to a bunch of services. Okay? Typekit is built into Creative Cloud, which is awesome. But Google Fonts allows me to go out and find Google Fonts on the web. So I can say find them. This is the best part. This is the part I love. It's going to go out and say, all right, let's go ahead and download the top 50 Google font families. So we can grab those, bring them down, design with them, and use them on our site. So that's pretty simple to do. So we can design, we want to be able to design with fonts that somebody else hosts that we're going to use. Google, Typekit for sure, because we have that included in Creative Cloud. Okay? Now, another type of font that we can work with, let's talk a little bit about these. How many of you guys have ever worked with icon fonts? Okay. What is an icon font? I try to describe. Go ahead. It's a font whose glyphs are icons and not letters? Wow, you does a much better job than I do. It's a font whose icons are glyphs instead of letters, right? Okay. So basically the idea here, look at this. These days, we're really concerned about download time, download speed, right? Because of mobile devices that go over networks and things like that. Not always connected to Wi-Fi, okay? So we have to think, scalable-wise, how can we make an image that can actually scale without creating 15 of the same stupid little icon, right? Back in the day, what we used to do is we used to make what's called a sprite sheet. How many of you guys ever heard of those? Okay, forget about those. We use them for SVG today, but we use a lot of these types of things because a font that we use on our website is a font. It's vector. It scales. We can use styling on it. We can do animation to it. We can do a lot of stuff. And it can be pretty small in size. It depends on what you do. If you guys ever want, you go to the CSS Tricks. This is a website, csstricks.com, great site. You're going to see a thing called Icon Fonts Are Awesome. And it's from a couple years ago, but it still holds true. You can see that you can change color and do all kinds of stuff to these things just to get an idea of what they are. Now, we use a lot of these types of icon fonts for things like little icons on buttons or social media icons you guys see, okay? Things like that. If you want to use these within Photoshop, Illustrator, and all these programs, what we can do is we can go out and just grab them. You're going to find that there are a ton of them out there. And let me open up one of these. Genericons is an example, okay? I'm not telling you to use this one. I have used this one in the past. But it's a font that you can use on your sites that you're building, okay? The other one that I tend to use quite often is called Font Awesome, all right? And there's a million of these out there. I'm sure some of you have your favorites, whatever. But the idea behind these is we download like a zip file, and we download fonts. They give them to us and say, here, use them on your sites. They give us an open type font usually, and they give us all the fonts we need to get it to work on our website. And they even give us the styling to use, okay? If I click on download right here, there's a big old download button, and I go out and take a look. I already did it, just so it doesn't waste time. They're going to give us a zip. If I unzip the zip and look inside of it, you're going to see they give us the styling we can use if we're building the site to use these, and they also give us the fonts. So you can just take the font you can use, the open type or the true type, whatever you want, install that, and you've got the icon font to use in your designs, okay? This is something we need to do. I can't tell you how many times I've seen people fake an icon. They'll draw it and be like, let's just use the Font Awesome font for this. And I'm like, why didn't you actually use the Font Awesome font for that? So we can do that. So if I install that, I double click and say install font. You can see the icons right there. I've already done it. I can then go to Photoshop or Illustrator or whatever program I want to do here, for instance. And let me zoom in a bit. And I want to put my icon fonts in here, so I'm just going to draw a text box, go up top to the fonts, and search for Font Awesome, and there we go. You just pick it, and you start adding your fonts. Now, if you guys are in Illustrator, use the Glyphs panel to insert these icons for any one of these icon fonts, okay? If you guys are in Photoshop, it's a little different story. What you need to do is you need to go to the site, and there's actually little icons, and they show you all the icons in here. We can copy-paste these into Photoshop. Okay, it's kind of stupid. Or if you know the codes, you can type them in. But there's a little cheat sheet here you can get, and you just go in and say, you know what, I want this little bank icon, because it just looks cool. I don't know why. And I'll just copy it, bam. And then I'll go to Photoshop, and I'll grab my little text box, and I'll paste it in, and I'll make sure it's the right size, and it actually is working. And that's actually working. Okay, it's white, it's gray. Okay, can you guys see it? Can you trust me? I need to keep moving, okay? It's going to be there, I promise you, all right? I failed somehow. That's fine, all right? It's there. Okay, whatever, trust me. There's a beautiful little bank. Okay, so font icons are awesome, something that we do use quite a bit. We also are going to be using a lot of other things. We're going to be using things like SVG. Okay, SVG is really big on the web now, and it's something that we use a lot of. The reason why we use this SVG, and I'm going to step back in a second and tell you what it is. The reason why we use a lot of this, why do we use a lot of SVG now? Because of the acronym, Scalable Vector Graphics. They're vector, they're scalable, they're awesome, okay? So we can take these things, and you guys can make a logo, a button, an icon, a this, or that, and it's still vector in websites in the browser, and it's totally infinitely scalable. It's just like going into Illustrator and taking something and jamming it out this big and that big, okay? So if we want to create SVG, let me do this. I'm going to go back over to Illustrator, and I've got this file, and let's just talk a little bit about SVG because there's tons of stuff to do here. With SVG, we can create SVG out of Illustrator. We can create it out of Photoshop now. Now, I use a lot of Illustrator, so I use the SVG creation in here more, okay? If you want to create this SVG stuff out of Illustrator, we can just do a save as. You got to make sure the artwork is cut out. I usually put it on its own artboard, okay, that kind of thing. All right, you can do that. Now, if we're going to go save as SVG, here's what I want to do. First of all, I want to show you guys what it looks like, how it acts, that kind of thing, and then we're going to go save it, all right? So I'm going to go out to my browser real quick and open up a new page, and I'm going to open up an SVG file that I just saved, and you guys are going to see what it does. It's the world's largest logo, okay? Now you're going to see, my screen, it looks awesome. You got to trust me again, okay? It's trust here, right? But if you do this, if you take SVG and stick it out there, SVG can or cannot be responsive, depends on how you make it. It's just going to scale infinitely, which is awesome. Now, it is going to remain vector and look great, and it works in almost every browser. And you know what browser I'm talking about when I say it doesn't work in, right? Okay. Matter of fact, here's a site you guys should go to. If anybody ever comes to you and says, there's this new cool thing out there, it's called blah, let's use it in our next site, okay? What you should immediately do is go to caniuse.com and see if you can actually use it. Can I Use is a great site because if somebody rattles off some HTML thing or CSS or whatever, and you're like, I don't even know what that is, you can just type in SVG, not that, SVG, and what it's going to do is it's going to immediately show you support for that thing in all the browsers, including mobile, and even give you links on where to go to learn more about it, which is cool. So you can see right here that my favorite, Internet Explorer 8, does not support SVG. Die, Internet Explorer 8, die, okay? But it works in most other browsers. That's why we're using it. If you also, I've got a website here you can go to just to take a look at it. Once again, csstricks.com. They don't pay me every time I show this, but it's a good site. And you're going to see, just search for using SVG, you guys. This is a great article, talks about it. He does a great job explaining all about it. If we want to use it, they're usually smaller files. They're usually smaller in file size. We can compress them further, too. We can also take the code that's in the image and stick it right in our page and do crazy stuff with it. We can animate it, which is insane, okay? Tons of stuff. Check this out. That's SVG, you guys. That was generated in Illustrator and saved out, and I'm viewing it in the browser right now with no plugins, nothing. It's an SVG file. That's pretty sweet, isn't it? Totally scalable, gonna work. Now, I'm gonna go back over to Illustrator, and if I wanna take content, images, etc., and I wanna save it out, the one thing you wanna try not to do is try not to use raster in SVG. You can, But if you stick it in, it's going to make the SVG file that much bigger, and it can't compress the raster image, okay? I'm not telling you not to. I'm just saying we don't usually do that. You can use fonts if you want in it. If you use fonts, you got to be careful. You got to test, because some browsers, who shall remain nameless, will replace the font with something like Times or Courier, okay? So if I want to save something like SVG, I'm going to go up to File and do Save As in Illustrator. And I go up down to the bottom down here. Let me pull this up so you guys can see it. It's a little too far down. Pull it up. There we go. So go down to the bottom down here. You're going to see two, SVG compressed and SVG. Do not be suckered into the word compressed. Don't use it. Just use SVG, and we're home free. I'm just going to say save it out. And we're not home free. I forgot. So every time you save something, you got to pay the consequence, right? So you got to look and see what we do here. All of these settings are pretty much set in stone. If you guys are using CS6 and earlier, you do need to check these settings. You need to make sure that SVG, the profile up here, is set to like 1.1, okay? For Creative Cloud subscribers, those of us that have Illustrator, we're good. We don't touch this stuff. The only thing in here you really need to look at are the fonts. If you think it's not going to work, you pick some crazy, wacky font that's hosted or not, giddy up, blah, you can convert to outlines. Okay? Got to be careful. You convert to outlines, what's going to happen is those outlines are going to become points. Each point adds to file size. So we got to think about these things and test. Only other thing, if you look down here, you're going to see it says responsive. You guys, SVG is freaking awesome because it's XML, which that's not awesome. But it means that if you guys turn on responsive, it takes the width and height out of it. That's essentially what it does. So it's infinitely scalable. So if I turn that on, it is infinitely scalable. You guys want to go look at the code? No, you don't. All right, fine. I will show you the code. It's so easy to read. Just look at that. Let it wash over you. Let it just read, soak it all in. Honestly, you guys, you're not going to read. You can kind of read this, okay? Look at this, though. Look at this. If you guys look right here, what do you think rect means? Not like destroyed, but it means rectangle. You guys look right here, you're like, oh, pattern. Oh, image. Oh, G. What do you guys think G means? No. It means group, okay? You're not going to read this, whatever. Let me get out of this. So I'm going to click OK. I'm going to save it out. It's going to go out to my desktop, and then I am set. Now, the great thing about SVG coming out of Illustrator is that you can actually open it back in Illustrator, which is cool, because Illustrator understands it. Now, as far as Photoshop is concerned, if we want to save out, let me do that. I'm going to go back over to Photoshop and show you. If we want to start saving out content, how many of you use the slice tools in like Photoshop and Illustrator and all these programs? Does anybody use them? Okay. Do you guys actually like them? I have a hate-hate relationship with them. I hate them. I don't like them at all. So the fact that Photoshop came out with a kind of a new method for saving out all this content is awesome, okay? Newer method. If we're going to save out our content, we can now save JPEG, GIF, PNG, and SVG out of Photoshop. I'm going to come up under File. You're going to see what's called Extract Assets. So instead of having to slice and go through all that headache, we can just pick a layer, pick a group, and if it's a group, it's usually going to take the whole thing and kind of smush it down to a single object with transparency if you want. We go to Extract Assets, and if you have any layers that are named .png, .jpeg, that kind of thing, they're going to immediately show up in this dialog as well. Now, Extract Assets, a couple things that I love about this is that, well, first of all, no slicing, okay? Second of all, if you look in here, you're going to see it's going to let you pick what you want. There's the SVG. You're not going to get the SVG if you guys do Save for Web, okay? You're going to get it through this method. Now, if I choose JPEG, for instance, I still have compression. There's not a lot of settings in here because, frankly, a lot of them are old school settings that we don't use a lot. You're going to look in here. We can also change the width and height if we need to. So if marketing or accounting comes to you and says, I need something for the email newsletter, and at 50%, you can spit one out real quick. What's great about this, too, is that you can actually create multiple versions of the same at different sizes, at different, kind of whatever you need, essentially, okay? What I want to get to here is exactly what I love about this. If you care about Retina, high DPI, if you look right up here, you're going to see, depending on how you design, you can immediately generate the Retina images, the Retina assets. So it's going to do that for us. Now, if I pick 2x up there, if I have a bunch of images out here, and my images are the exact size I need them at, pixel-wise, like 1,200 pixels, that's really not going to help me much. Because it's going to do what you would do. You take that thing and double the pixel width, and it's going to not look so hot, right? That's why we're using smart objects. That's why we're going in and linking this content, making it easier for this thing to be able to work. It's got all this pixel data to work with then. So if I say 2x, that's me designing at 1,300 or whatever I decided. If I choose 0.5x, that's me designing at Retina size and saying, let's make the standard images now, the regular old sizes, okay? So we have that. So it's going to create a folder. It's going to stick them in there, and we've got our images. Once again, it's proper setup, though. That's the key. Now, if I look down here at settings down at the bottom, you're going to see it's going to create a folder. You guys can actually, you can change the suffix if you want to. They usually use the typical Apple at 2x type thing, okay? This freaks me out, but it's actually kind of cool. As soon as you are done updating a document and you save it, not even save it, just update it, it'll spit a new round of images out. So you can just keep on, like, yeah. Hopefully you have a fast machine. No, I've actually used that on some projects when I keep having to make changes, and it was pretty cool. So we go and extract. I didn't want to do that. We go and extract. I'll click extract. We get our images. Now, it's going to tell you, the one thing about this method is it's going to tell you that it's going to alter the layer names, which is important. I'll show you in a second. It's going to change the layer names to be like .ping, .jpeg, et cetera. That's how this engine works, okay? So I'll click OK. It's going to run it, do its thing, save it somewhere. Bam, done. And once it runs, we've got all the images. It's also generating half-size images. There's the scaled at 50, so there's all my images right now I can use, okay? Now, like I said before, what it's going to do is it's going to go in and it's going to change the layer names for you. And you can see right here, Vimes Blur Path Gallery. Can you guys see it? Sorry, can you guys see that? Let me pull it up. Hold on. Vimes Blur Path Gallery, JPEG 61%. That's how it's going to name your images, okay? That's how it knows to work, all right? Okay, let me pull this back. I only got a few more minutes here. Let me do this in Illustrator. How many of you save JPEG, GIF, or PNG out of Illustrator? Okay, does anybody use the slice tools in Illustrator? Okay, I'll show you kind of we still use slice tools. We still do this kind of stuff, okay? But a little faster method, if you want to, for PNG files. This is for PNG only, not SVG, not JPEG, not GIF, PNG. What I tend to do is I tend to save a lot of PNGs. To me, GIF is dead, okay? Not really. But I don't use as much GIF anymore. I use PNG 8 in place of GIF, rather, okay? If you guys want to save PNG out of Illustrator, one of the easy ways to do it, how many of you ever used the CSS properties panel in Illustrator? In Creative Cloud version of Illustrator, we have this panel called CSS properties. Now, the idea behind this panel is that if I click on some text or an object, it's actually going to give me the generated CSS that I could use in my web page, okay? So technically, I could select a whole bunch of stuff, and I would get a CSS file for all the CSS to generate to make all this content. Now, I don't use it that way, okay? You can use it however you want. Sometimes I'll go in here, my designer will hand me a file, and I'm sick of dealing with leading, okay? So, well, first of all, I'll just leave it at default, and then I'll get yelled at, and then I need to go change it. But I'll go in here and see, oh, what's the line height on this thing? Or if it's aside or it's different from default, it will tell me. This is not, okay? But if I go in and do this, I'm going to grab something that it can't figure out how to use CSS to make. We can't really use CSS to make that logo. So if you look over here, it's going to generate a ping 32 automatically for me. So it's going to keep everything. It's going to knock it out, make it transparent, ping 32, beautiful drop shadows, all that stuff. All I need to do is I usually will just click on a bunch of images that I need, and there's a little export button at the bottom down here. It'll just spit out the images in a folder on your desktop, and you're done. It'll give you CSS too, but just throw that in the trash, okay? Or do what you want with it. I don't know. But this is a quick way to get PNG files out of Illustrator, one way that I use. Kind of easy, kind of simple. All right, you guys, we're pretty much at time here. I want to make sure that I covered most everything I wanted to hit. Does anybody have any questions on anything we talked about or something I didn't talk about? That type of thing? I'll let you know. There's a lot to know, right? There's a lot to know with everything we do. But with web, we're constantly learning. And you need to keep up. You need to keep learning, especially design, because you're kind of the starting point. We're working with these designs to make them into reality, right? So if they're not set up properly, if they're not working properly, or take advantage of the newest and latest and greatest, then you know what I mean. Any questions? Yeah. 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 Yes, she's asking about different tools like Sketch and working with artboards and different things like that, and will Illustrator make it easier to move artboards around? You know what? Adobe is constantly looking at what everybody needs, and everybody yells at them and talks to them and says, we want this, we want this, we want this. I do too. I yell at them too. And they really are focusing on web and a lot of things like that, so I wouldn't be surprised going in the future here. They've made a lot of strides, like in Photoshop, just putting in a lot of these things like extract assets and working with vector shapes and round corners and all that kind of stuff. There's certain things I didn't show you guys, but yeah, it's pick your poison in some ways, you know what I mean? So for now. Any other questions? Yeah. To share the bookmarks? Yeah, there's got to be a way to do that. There's got to be a technological, but seriously, I don't want to email everyone. I want to, what's that? Yeah, exactly. I haven't created the page, but here, why don't you guys do this? If you want this, I have a PDF file that's 9 pages long with all of these bookmarks that I set all these technologies to, which I think are awesome. They're really cool. If you go to my website, it's not going to be there right now, because I'm going to make it in 10 seconds here, okay? But if you guys go to my website is brianwoodtraining.com, and if you go to the URL, how PDF, we'll keep it simple, okay? How PDF, how simple is that? If you guys go to that URL, give me an hour, and then you can go up and grab the PDF, okay? Yeah, no worries. If you guys have any other questions, feel free to come up. But thank you very much. I appreciate your time.